these people with nothing better to do. Excellent.
Well, thank you everyone for coming to StocktonCon, the winter edition. Who in the audience at first time in StocktonCon, either winter or summer? Wow, that is great. Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you for supporting the local community here in Stockton. To my right, we have C. Andrew Nelson, who has played Darth Vader for a number of years. And to his right is Dominic Pace, recently of The Mandalorian and one of the bounty hunters, Gekko. So let's give a round of applause for these two fine actors to my right. And now let's start off with that first acting gig. You go through that first audition. You probably didn't get it. You went to another audition. May have got it, may not have got it. Talk about when you got that first role, got that first gig, got the call. Take us through that moment. Andrew?
Okay. Oh, you're going to start with me. I'm the sacrificial lamb here. Okay.
Exactly.
So, wow, well, my first acting was when I was 10 years old in theater. I started off in theater, and I always loved wearing costumes. And when I found out that they'll actually pay you to wear costumes, I liked it even more as an actor. So I auditioned for a play, and it was a production of Oliver, the musical, and I wanted to play Oliver. Did not get that part. I got some chorus part instead. So
I was one of the sickly children in Oliver.
So was I. Yes, but the acting bug caught me right then, and I've been a performer ever since. But I'll let Dominic give his first acting, and you can come back to me about how I got the Vader thing. So
I think it's an interesting question, because I think when we start out, obviously you get little things like short films and such. You get, theater plays and musicals in high school and such. But for me, what was really monumental was I started to pursue this when I was 18 years old, and it wasn't for 10 more years that I got my first guest star on NYPD Blue, and that to me was when it really just meant so much to get that first substantial role, because it said to me, at least at the major league level, that to some extent you sort of succeeded and achieved that dream, at least at that level. So for me, it was 2003 with NYPD Blue. I was opposite Henry Simmons. We're still friends to this day from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., as well as Gordon Clapp, and I'll never forget it. We're on the Fox lot, legendary Fox lot with so many classic films. One of my favorites was Young Frankenstein. If you ever get a chance to tour Fox, they have the mural of Gene Wilder and Terry Garr and just that legendary cast and Mel Brooks outside. But just to be there at the Fox lot after 10 years of hustling and studying, and I started in New York and grinded it out in Hollywood with so many different odd jobs, that just really meant the world to me in 2003.
Yeah, that's the thing. When every actor is looking for that moment. You're always looking for your big break, but you're also looking for that moment when you feel like, wow, I've made it. I've done something here. I've gotten to a different level now. And it's like the scene that, being there on the lot like that, I think for me, my first film was Howard the Duck, from 1986. You're applauding that?
That's not that bad of a movie.
I know, but it's this close to being a Mystery Science Theater film. I know, and it's one of those films that's so bad it's good. It really is. But I was a rocker in that. My role got drastically reduced in the film. So, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm on a film set, and I didn't break in, I didn't sneak in or anything like that, and there's George Lucas, because he was right on set there. A lot of people don't realize he was the executive producer of that film. He kind of tries to distance himself from it, but I saw him, he was there, and just that moment, my first time meeting, or not, I didn't actually meet him, but I saw him on set. It was like a foreshadowing of things to come. But that was when I thought, okay, wow, all right, I'm at a different level now than anything I'd done before. So.
And Andrew, I know you told the story before on how you got Vader, but it was interesting that you were working for Lucasfilm.
Yeah. And
you take the story from here after you get the phone call.
Yeah. I was working. I've always wanted and have been blessed to have the dual career of being both an actor and a visual effects artist and animator. So the nice thing about that is they're opposite cycles of each other. So there's production where you're out shooting, you're an actor, you're doing something like that, and then the next cycle is you're doing post-production. You're doing the editing, you're doing the visual effects, you're doing the animation and all that stuff. And so I learned that if you can do both, you can work more often throughout the year. So I go back and forth. But I was always interested in animation and visual effects, and I had gotten a job at LucasArts, a game company that Lucasfilm owned. And I was hired as a customer support representative. So it was a foot in the door, you know. So if you bought a game from LucasArts and you couldn't get it to run on your computer, and you were all upset, and you looked in the back of the manual and you found that 800 number back there and you called to complain, I was the guy that answered the phone. So I did that for about a year, and then submitted my portfolio to the art director, and then transferred over to the art department, and started at the very bottom of the art department there in a position called art technician. And the first game that I worked on was a game called Mortimer and the Riddles of the Medallion. None of you pretend that you know that game. Nobody remembers that game. It's a great game, but it just didn't sell very well. When I started on that game, I was art technician. By the time the game actually shipped, I was lead effects animator, and then became a visual effects supervisor and senior artist soon after that. But I was sitting at my desk at LucasArts, doing my job, just minding my business, and my phone rings. And it's the head of public relations, which was a woman upstairs from me. And she starts the conversation not by saying hello. She just says, "Hey Andrew, how tall are you?" I'm 6'5". Why do you ask, Sue? She was 5'1". I figured she wanted something down off the shelf. Then she says, "Do you have any acting experience?" Where's this going? I said, "Yeah." At that point, I had about 20 years of theater and film and stuff like that, and I told her that. And then she says to me, "Can you breathe for me?" So, the wheels are spinning in your head, you're trying to put all the pieces together, and I thought to myself, okay, well, all right, how tall are you? Do you have any acting experience? It's a Lucas company. Can you breathe for me? So I leaned into my phone and I went, oh. Like that. And I go, "So what's going on, Sue?" And she said they were looking for somebody to play Vader for a charity event for Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. This is before the 501st Legion and all that. So they wanted me to do a meet and greet so the kids could have their photos taken with Darth Vader. So I tried on the costume, went up to Skywalker Ranch, tried on the costume, the original costume, and it fit, thankfully. And I did that one event, and I thought, well, that's it. It's a one and done. And I just, thank God I had a chance to do it. But then they called me back for something else. They called me back for the video games, for LucasArts. They called me back for the special edition. And I ended up playing Vader 70 times over 12 years. My wife made me keep count. So they tell me I've spent more time in the official Vader costume than any other actor. Not going to argue with Lucasfilm over that. But that's how I got the gig.
Hey, Dominic, I watched one video of an interview with you, and when you were in the cantina scene as one of the bounty hunters, you talked about creating a space as an actor and creating kind of that, getting in that moment, getting in that mood. Can you talk about, as an actor, kind of getting into the role of the character?
Sure. This was obviously a really unique and amazing experience. A lot of times when you're an actor, you kind of have sort of this out-of-body experience. As you get older, or obviously some child actors are very seasoned when they're younger, you're able to just kind of leave the universe behind. What was really special for this, if I can go back for 1 second, is just my first playset was a Cantina playset in 1980. So the fact that I was there amongst George Lucas, who was there on the first day, and also Favreau, Filoni, and Deborah Chow, this amazing director who's going to take over the Kenobi series. It was just really surreal in many ways. The cool thing was with Filoni was he gave us a little bit to do in terms of, Carl was talking with Brendan Wayne, John Wayne's grandson, who played the Mandalorian during the time that I was there. But it was just basically to flesh out our character a little bit more. And for me, obviously, a lot of times there was a theater group I was with Tim Robbins. It was called the Actors Gang. And they would say to dress your character from the outside in. And with this breathing mask that was equipped for me by Joseph A. Porro, he's one of the top costume designers, as well as the amazing makeup from Brian Seid, I saw this character, this Bounty Hunter Guild character, as somebody who was very unapologetic. So we had some interaction in the back, and for me, in terms of just some of the discussion that we had, some of the close-ups that they had also at the bar as well, it was just in terms of being unapologetic and non-negotiable. So I hate to say to all the young kids that I probably would have kept Baby Yoda for the bad reasons, and not to coddle him and get him chicky nuggies and chocolate milk there, as they've been saying there. But yeah, very unapologetic bounty hunter, and like I said, overall, just what an amazing experience as a lifelong Star Wars fan.
And also, you know, I read that, you know, you actually collect a lot of Star Wars memorabilia.
Yeah, I've been a fan. I mean, the original trilogy for me just meant the world. My first movie was with Miramax. It was a cheesy spin-off of Saturday Night Fever called That's the Way I Like It. And my publicist...
I've seen that.
Yes. My publicist at the time, I played a caricature of John Travolta, but my publicist said, look, you know, maybe you get 5 people that are going to see this movie. But with your collection, episode 1 coming out, we'd like to cover your collection. So if you YouTube Dominic Pace Entertainment Tonight, you see me about 30 pounds lighter, basically gloating over my collection in my closet. I've been a lifelong Star Wars fan and collector, so obviously this was an absolute dream come true to have this opportunity.
Now, Andrew, did your son ever come home and say, hey, by the way, I have a figure of Darth Vader? And
My son, no, my son doesn't care about Star Wars. My son and my daughter are, well, my wife's also an actress, so they've grown up around it. So it doesn't really faze them. In fact, my kids, they only saw the original trilogy once. Actually, no, they saw Return of the Jedi twice because they thought the Ewoks were cute. They've never seen the prequels, and they've only recently seen the more recent films. But they're not big into Star Wars. In fact, here's the interesting thing is that my daughter has a boyfriend now, and they've been together for over a year. He still doesn't know about my dark side. So
does that come out? I mean, if that were to come out, I mean, do you just breathe, you know, on the iPhone and
no, I don't know.
Catch my daughter?
No, it's up to my daughter. When she wants to tell him, fine. Now, if he, you know, God forbid he Googles my name, but you know, he knows that I worked at ILM. He knows I worked at LucasArts, but he doesn't know the rest of the story. So, yeah, so it's an interesting.
We'll open up to questions a little bit. Anyone in the audience have some questions for our two
I haven't put on my glasses so I could see you, and I'm a vain actor. I don't normally do that.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of The Rise of Skywalker?
What do we think of The Rise of Skywalker? I have not seen it yet. I've been very busy lately. I have not seen it yet.
I enjoyed it. I think the issue is you know, this is one of the few franchises. I mean, well, you know, you take Marvel, you take DC, and you take the Star Wars universe. And it is one of the few in terms of Hollywood as far as to be able to please everyone. It's almost going to be impossible. Yeah. Most films, you have specific demographics where whoever sees it is going to enjoy it. But overall, for me, it's like I think you just have to, it's like it's a social project to where you share the food. And there are certain things that I would say, okay, well, I would have preferred this differently or that differently. But also at the same time, I mean, to see what's going online, you know, I think we all just kind of need to come together and appreciate what Lucas has created, J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson, and just appreciate the fact that we have this escapism. You know, we can get into details, you know, left and right, but at the same time, I left the theater and I was just satisfied. And I think, if anything, to just take a step back and just appreciate what Star Wars is about. It's about hope. It's about the connections of family and those bonds. And again, sometimes storylines and sometimes your favorite movies may be the greatest, but also at the same time, if you take a step back, it still has that beautiful universe that he has created, which is absolutely beyond words.
Yeah, you know, I'm blessed to be able to play it.
Yeah, and so special for so many people.
Yeah, and the thing is just so much Star Wars that, okay, maybe you don't like this one, maybe you don't like that one. There's plenty more to choose from, so that's what's great. Yeah.
I'm going to quickly add that when I saw it in theaters, about half of the audience was dressed in Jedi robes. I mean, where else are you going to see that?
Right,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I went to the theater with my wife about a few months ago. We went to go see a really interesting horror film called Midsummer. And there was a woman that was behind the concessions, and she was, you know, serving us popcorn, and she was suggesting a movie, Dark Phoenix. And I hadn't seen it. It wasn't something that really appealed to me, more or less. But when she explained it to me, her eyes lit up. And the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes what may not mean something for me might inspire a young girl, might inspire somebody from a different walk of life, to where that's not my place to say whether you should, you know, be inspired by this Marvel show or DC or Star Wars for that matter. So it's like, again, I think it's for everybody, these films. So you take and you give, you know, and certain things you say, okay, well, this might not have appealed to me, this aspect or that aspect, but at the same time, it might be inspiring a young child of a gender or race or what have you, where you have to appreciate that and respect that.
Absolutely.
And Dominic, you said an interesting thing online about the Star Wars and the Star Wars love and hate for everything that is Star Wars. Very similar to sports, obviously. I'm a Met fan, you're a Met fan.
Yeah.
You'll be interviewing for the Met opening for manager next week.
Yes.
But it's a very interesting kind of relationship between sports and the person in Star Wars.
Absolutely. What I was saying that day was just, you know, from us back in the East Coast, and also we got 49er fans here today, perhaps. Just the fact that you live and you die with your team. You know, sometimes you're not gonna be the biggest fan, but at the same time, you know that we can't live without that team, and that's, for me, that's Lucasfilm. You know, it's just, you know, with the ups and downs, but for me, it's always been a positive experience. It's about escapism and appreciation for everyone's dreams. You know. Episode 5 was my favorite, and I have no issues with that. But at the same time, somebody loves 8 or Solo or what have you. I mean, this is for everybody. It's not just for us. You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And talking to actors, they're very into, you know, they most start in live theater, and they get that kind of relationship with the audience. Well, for both of you, what is kind of your favorite type of medium? Is it working TV, film? Is it working live theater? Is it just getting paid?
That's always nice, but you can't make that the focus of things. If you want, anybody here want to become an actor? Couple, okay. Don't do it strictly for the money. You'll go broke. Don't do it, you know, or you'll hate the job. I mean, if you do it strictly for the money, you'll hate the job eventually. If you do it strictly for the love of it, you'll go broke. You know, you have to understand that it's you know, it's a wonderful thing. It's a great thing. I love being an actor, but it's work. You know. But for me, yeah, I'm always going to love theater because I love the connection. I love the live audience. It's also why I did stand-up comedy for many years too, because you have that instant feedback that you know how things are doing. You can then adjust your performance right then and there. You know, and you've probably gotten that in theater too. So yeah. I also love working on camera because you don't have to memorize everything. You can cut and make an edit here and there. Yeah. But for me, I love doing voice work because you can be anything. Doesn't matter how you look. You can be anything. Doesn't matter how you look while you're recording it either. Because I look a fool sometimes in the recording booth just to get that sound, just to get that voice. And I just love doing that. I love the possibilities are endless. It's just whatever you can do with your voice. That's great.
I think for me, I mean, there's a couple of different, you know, you can't just pick one. I mean, one is certainly the escapism, but at the same time, I think every actor would agree that, you know, it's so gratifying to be part of something that's very thought-provoking. I'm starring in a film that will be out before September called Anonymous Killers. It deals with a lot of social issues, those who come from privilege, those who don't. And everybody's going to be able to walk away from this film with a different view, depending on your politics, depending on your social issues. There's no judgment in regards to however you feel. But to be able to do that as an artist is really gratifying because sometimes the director said something brilliant, which he said he wants to make a film that's remarkable. And what he means by that is after a week or two, you're remarking on it. People are going to remark about it, and especially when it deals with issues that are close to people's hearts, whether it deals with family, social issues, politics, what have you. I think all the time it becomes very inspirational to do as a performer, to be able to touch people's lives in that way.
Yeah, one of the things that when you do something that you know means, you know, that your body of work means something to people, that you're touching their hearts, and that's the most gratifying thing. One of the things that I did that I'm so fortunate and so, you know, pleased to be able to work on is there was a PBS Kids show called Between the Lions that was created by some guys that had left Sesame Street because they kind of got fed up with Sesame Street, really not teaching anything. They wanted to really teach reading through phonics, and they wanted to do it in a way that you know the kids would enjoy it, but there'd be a whole level of comedy and humor for the parents too, so that everybody could watch it together. And working on that show, I worked on that show both as a voice actor and as an animator, and that. When I hear from people saying, "Oh, I love that show, and my kids learned how to read from that," or "I learned how to read from this show, and that was so funny, and I remember that book that you animated," and everything. That to me is just incredible. Anytime doing shows, you know, convention like this is why I do convention like this, because you know I spent many years on that side of the table as a fan before I was ever invited to sit down on this side of the table with a handful of Sharpies and a stack of photos, you know, and so I never lose sight of that.
And also, we might also mention that you do these signings actually as part of a fundraiser for the Starlight Foundation.
Yeah, I help raise money for the Starlight Children's Foundation. So I've been doing that since 2005 with my very first convention. So I was in I got asked to do conventions for many years and kind of turned it down. I said, well, who wants to see me? And I said, no, you've got all these years of stories nobody's heard. And I said, oh, I'll do it if I can help raise money for charity. And I was in New York. We were doing the David Letterman show. It was going to be top 10 lines you'll never hear in a Star Wars movie. David Letterman used to have those top 10 lists. And so we had 10 Star Wars characters out there on stage to deliver the top 10 list. Vader was the #1 answer, which was, I once used the Force to open a jar of Vlasic pickles. That's, Letterman's humor there. So we were doing a run through, and I was there with Matthew Wood from Lucasfilm, who was the voice of General Grievous, also an editor and a sound guy. And we were walking back from the Ed Sullivan Theater where they used to shoot that show, back to our hotel. This is 2005. And we walked past a movie theater, and there were all these people in line to see Revenge of the Sith camping out 3 weeks before the film came out. Most of them in costume. And we went up to them and said, what are you guys doing? We didn't tell them who we were, but we were like, what are you guys doing? And they told me that they were doing a stand-in-line-a-thon to benefit Starlight Children's Foundation. And as they told me about the organization, I thought, there's my charity. They do a whole, I won't do a whole commercial, but they set up a network of programs with hospitals and clinics all around the country, all around the world, to make sure that kids have a childhood. They have a life, depending on whatever they're going through with whatever treatment. Because if you're always focused on, I got to go to this therapy, I got to go to that surgery, I got to do, whatever, you don't heal up the way that you do if you get your mind off of that. So they make sure the kids have a childhood. So I've been supporting them, through my convention appearances.
Now, in regards to the 2 Star Wars characters you guys play, Andrew, did you ever talk to David Prowse about how he played Darth Vader, or?
I met David Prowse once. It was back in 1978. I was 15 years old, and he came to Berkeley to do a signing at a collectible shop that was called the Federation Trading Post. And the line was huge. It was just blocks long around the building and everything. I was at the very end of the line, I think. And he was there all day signing, and when his hand would get tired from signing, he'd get up and walk the line and shake hands with people, and he'd have little kids sit in his hand and just lift them up because he was, a bodybuilder, weightlifter. And so I was just one of the last people to sign an autograph for him. I shook his hand and chatted with him. That's the only time we've ever met. Apparently, he didn't like to do conventions with other people associated with Vader, but he seemed like a nice guy to me. But I didn't get a chance to chat with him about that. And then the other Vader that I know, or I actually do know, is Hayden Christensen, who I met about 4 days after he was cast as Anakin. Very nervous young guy, just beat out everybody for that role, and all eyes are on you immediately. The publicity machine kicks in instantly. And so 4 days in, and he's already been interviewed by Entertainment Tonight. Paparazzi's following him around. We were doing a photo shoot in Santa Monica for Premiere Magazine. Me as Vader, he as himself. And he walks into the studio, sees me in the costume with everything except the head on. And he walks up and he goes, whoa. And I knew he was nervous. And I just reached out, shook his hand and said, how are you holding up so far? He goes, I'm doing okay, I'm doing okay. And we spent the whole afternoon together, doing this photo shoot. We just had a blast. Great guy. And I didn't see him for a while, except on that monitor at ILM, as we're working on effect shots for Attack of the Clones. And then we did the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards together. Me as Vader, he as himself. And and he was great. So I think he got a few tips from me that day because at the time he didn't know he was going to play Vader. I did. Just something told me. I said to my fellow people from Lucasfilm when we were doing that photo shoot, I said he's going to play Vader in episode 3. No, it's going to be you. It's going to be Hayden. You watch. And he earned it. So.
And Dominic, one thing I read was the amount of time it took to get into that costume. 3 hours in the makeup chair.
Sure, yeah.
What do you think about during that time?
I think every Star Wars fan would be able to relate. If I were doing a modern day crime drama, which I normally do, that would obviously be tedious. But I think anyone to be able to be given that gift to be your own unique, not only Star Wars character, but also a member of the Bounty Hunter Guild was just beyond words. I had previous prosthetic experience. The first time I did it, I was with Hugh Jackman on Van Helsing. I doubled for Frankenstein opposite Schuler Hensley. And I actually got a little bit claustrophobic. As the years progressed, I did Bright with Will Smith. I was one of the Orcs, and also Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I was one of the Kree, and guards, it becomes sort of a comforting feeling, almost feeling like you're getting pampered.
Yeah, it
but,
really does.
But the first time when I had a mask with as Frankenstein, it became a little bit claustrophobic because it's not your typical Halloween mask. And you're in this costume for 15, 16 hours. But again, I think if I told any of you, that you'd be able to be your own unique bounty hunter, and the fact that they would make you more elaborate due to the makeup and the prosthetics, it was a labor of love. I mean, I was just so excited. I didn't even care on 6 hours of sleep. I couldn't even sleep. It was just the adrenaline rush was beyond words.
Yeah, you don't get jaded with this stuff. You just don't. You instantly turn into like a little kid. You try to be cool about it because you're a professional actor and everything, but you're a little kid. It's like, people ask me, oh, what's it like, being inside the Vader costume? Well, first, it's hot. It's blistering hot inside there. There's no fans inside there at all. But it's amazing too. You put on the costume and it takes, as long as your costume, it takes about 45 minutes to get into the costume because you want to make sure everything looks right and everything's in the right place and there's no wrinkles and no smudges on the helmet or anything like that. And so it takes about 40-45 minutes to get into the costume, about 5 minutes to get out of it at the end of the day because, it doesn't matter, turn it inside out, get me out of here, it's hot. But you get the last thing you put on is, is the mask, and then the helmet that comes back on. It's 17 pieces of the whole costume. And you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror, and you don't think, hey, there I am in the Vader costume. You think, there's Darth Vader. And you walk differently, you move different. Everything's different at that moment because you feel that character. But yeah, and I know exactly what you're talking about with prosthetics because I've done that too, and yeah, it's crazy. But when it's something like this, I did a commercial and a print ad for M&M's where we had to shoot it all in one day, and I was in the Vader costume for 21 hours straight. I got the head off, but I had everything else on for 21 hours. But it felt like it went by like that because it's I can't even put it into words, really. It's just
love the franchise.
Yeah, you love the franchise, and you know you're doing something, cool.
Well, we are out of time. Let's thank our two actors to my right. They are up on the fun deck, so you can meet them, take a picture, get an autograph, all that fun stuff through the rest of StocktonCon. So thank you for coming out, and thank you.
Yeah, come on up and see us.
Thank you.
Or if you're too